The ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro is one of the first urban centers in human history. Nestled in southern Pakistan's Indus River Valley, Mohenjo-Daro is the largest and best preserved city of the Indus Civilization.
Look at this. It's going deeper, 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 deeper. We don't know how deep it is there.
They built cities with underground drainage before Rome existed, crafted jewelry still worn today, and may have invented the world's first dockyard 5,000 years ago.
The interesting thing is, we still don't know how far it extends. As our research progresses, it'll be possible to discover how far it goes.
To find out more about the geological timescale and rock layers at Rakhigarhi, the archaeologists have dug out an index trench.
The Indus Valley Civilization wasn't just advanced, it was unbelievably ahead of its time. From forgotten fire altars in the desert to trade routes stretching into the Arabian Sea, their secrets are only now resurfacing.
This year's first excavation season started on February 24th and finishes now as the heat becomes unbearable. The findings include Harappan burial sites, a settlement with a burnt brick wall.
And wait until you see what archaeologists found sealed in a Harappan warehouse. You won't believe what it was waiting to ship. The Serpent River and the Vanished Masters of Water. Beneath Mohenjo-Daro, a 5,000-year-old riddle winds through its mud brick alleys and silent wells. And some say the answer isn't buried in the ground, it flows in the river.
Mohenjo-Daro means Mound of the Dead. This 4,500-year-old archaeological site is located in Pakistan's southern Sindh province.
The Indus, a shimmering serpent born in Himalayan ice, gliding across the scorched lands of Pakistan, once feeding a civilization far ahead of its time, then vanishing without a trace. Why here? Why build where floods could swallow a city whole? Theories abound. Not that they feared the water, they may have ruled it. Some believe they harnessed the river's chaos. Ancient Sanskrit texts even reference the Sarasvati, a river of divine purity. According to myth, it was along her banks that Vyasadeva, the sage behind the Mahabharata, foresaw the unraveling of virtue in the material world. A quiet warning, maybe, that even the most enlightened empires are never safe from silence. Fast forward to the 1920s. British archaeologists like M.S. Vats and R.D. Banerjee began scraping the surface, and what they found shattered expectations. They thought they'd find a ruin. What they uncovered was an entire urban system. Mohenjo-Daro wasn't alone. It was part of a sprawling network of ancient cities, many the size of modern metropolises. This wasn't a provincial settlement. Mohenjo-Daro stretched across a square kilometer, home to over 40,000 people. It stood shoulder to shoulder with ancient Thebes, Ur, or Babylon.
They founded the largest city of the Indus Civilization, with 40,000 people and an area of a square kilometer.
But where were the kings? The monuments? The war stories etched in stone? Nowhere. Instead, they found carved toys, marbles, dice, and animal figurines. No swords, no fortresses. The ruins felt oddly gentle. Archaeologist Ernest Mackay once said it best. It's as though we found the city of children. But this was no child's play.
The first archaeologists thought they had discovered cities of children. They unearthed toys, dice, whistles.
The city's design was surgical. Roads met at precise right angles. Some were 9 meters wide, wider than many Karachi streets today. Nearly every home had a bathroom. Wells dotted every courtyard. Public toilets lined the streets. This was not just sanitation, it was hydraulic science. They didn't fear water, they revered it. And then came the crown jewel, the Great Bath. Perched on a raised brick platform, its floor sealed with watertight layers, its drains elegantly designed, the bath wasn't just for bathing, it was sacred. Some call it humanity's first public water tank. Its very layout mirrored Vedic purification rituals that survive in India to this day. Between sacred myth and cold archaeology, one theory rises. The Indus people weren't just urban pioneers, they were spiritual engineers. They didn't just live with water, they worshipped it. And that, perhaps more than anything, is what set them apart. Dholavira's cryptic code and stone-cut secrets. Shift southwest into Gujarat's salt-blasted desert, and you'll find another sleeping giant beneath 8 meters of dust, Dholavira. Lost in time, once surrounded by water, now marooned in white-crusted flats. But this city didn't echo the grandeur of pyramids or ziggurats. It whispered something far more radical. Where others built for gods, Dholavira built for water. Not just to drink it, but to command it. What stunned archaeologists wasn't just the scale, but the obsession. Massive reservoirs, not temples, dominated the landscape.
Archaeologists are particularly interested in the city's outskirts.
Residents didn't wait for rain. They caught it, redirected it, shaped the earth and stone until water bent to their will. Dholavira's engineers carved underground conduits, built hydraulic slopes, and lined their city with 16 immense reservoirs. Some could hold more than 250,000 cubic meters of water. Their stone walls, rising 15 meters high, were cut with math-like precision. Water levels were balanced with plumb lines. Himalayan cedar beams reinforced the structures. They didn't build like survivors, they built like scientists. But Dholavira's greatest mystery wasn't in its stones, it was underground. In a quiet corner of the ruins, a rectangular pit sliced through solid rock. It kept going, down, deeper than anyone had expected. Was it a war shelter, a hidden shrine, or something more? When Professor R.S. Bisht stepped inside, he didn't find a drain. He stood in the first known example of Harappan rock-cut architecture, a subterranean marvel that some now call India's forgotten leap into the Stone Age. Then came a moment that froze the excavation team in place. In 1999, just beneath Dholavira's northern gate, something gleamed under layers of dirt, an inscription.
At the foot of the northern entrance, the archaeological team had made a discovery. Their brushes uncovered what looked like an inscription.
Not scratched, not painted, but built, each symbol over 30 centimeters tall, inlaid with quartz. It spanned the size of a modern signboard. A welcome plaque, a royal nameplate, a traffic sign. That last theory, yes, the world's first traffic sign, has kept researchers wide-eyed for decades. But the real dream is buried deeper. A bilingual tablet, one that speaks in both Indus script and Mesopotamian cuneiform. A true Rosetta Stone. So far, silence. Across the Indus world, over 2,000 seals have emerged, etched with buffalo, zebu, crocodiles, and creatures from myth, each one paired with symbols. Over 400 distinct signs repeat in patterns. Some suggest syllables, others hint at celestial charts, but without translation, they remain what they are, the oldest unread book humanity has ever held. Masters of trade, ghosts of the sea. If water was the soul of the Indus civilization, then trade was its heartbeat, steady, deliberate, and far-reaching. These people weren't just artisans. They were strategists, economists, and global-minded thinkers in a world that hadn't even invented borders yet. From the finely carved seals worn like pendants to the near-industrial ceramic output in places like Harappa, everything speaks of booming commerce. Some experts now believe the Indus may have hosted the largest textile industry of the ancient world. But no looms remain. Only ghost-like impressions of fabric on pottery shards and faint seal carvings hint at a lost empire of weavers. Which begs the question, what else have we missed? In the deeper layers of Harappan markets, archaeologists found stone weights, smooth granite cuboids, nearly identical in mass. Some differ by just milligrams. It's possibly the earliest known system of standardized measurement. They weren't just trading goods. They were exporting trust, a system of trade so precise it could be recognized across cities, across cultures. But what truly changed the game were their ships. Flat-bottomed boats, perfect for gliding across the shallow Indus, still navigate Pakistan's waters today. Built from logs and reeds, they mirror the vessels stamped onto ancient Harappan seals.
But the kind of situation we see here, we see that, we think that Harappan Empire was not ruled by one person. It was an economic empire, it was a cultural empire, within which there were several rulers.
The resemblance is uncanny, so much so that some boat builders today swear their ancestors passed down the same blueprints. With those boats, they say, came the stories. Whispers of voyages that went far beyond the river's mouth, into open seas lit only by stars. And those whispers, they weren't fiction. On the island of Nar, near Abu Dhabi, carnelian beads and etched pottery have been found. Items unmistakably Harappan. Radiocarbon dating places them around 2300 BCE, right at the peak of Indus trade. In Bahrain, burial mounds overflow with Indus goods. This wasn't just trade, it was presence, settlements, cultural exchange at a level most thought impossible for the time. One archaeologist, scanning a broken seal, dared to wonder aloud, if Mesopotamia and Indus were so connected, there has to be a dual inscription somewhere, one that speaks both languages. If it's ever found, it could finally decode the mysterious Indus script. But the strangeness runs deeper. Ancient Mesopotamian tablets reference a land called Meluha, a distant sea-bound place rich in goods. Many now believe Meluha was the Indus Valley. Some records even note Mesopotamian kings hiring Meluhan interpreters, suggesting face-to-face communication across more than 3,500 kilometers. And yet, no one knows what the Harappans called themselves.
10% of the whole collection that was imported from outside, mainly from the Indus and Balochistan.
Cracks in the empire, whispers in the sand. For 5 centuries, the Indus civilization glowed across the subcontinent like a constellation made of brick and brilliance. But then, around 1800 BCE, the lights began to dim. Quietly, mentions of Meluha vanished from Mesopotamian records. Trade dried up, cities emptied. In places like Mohenjo-Daro, tools were found mid-task, left as if their owners simply stood up and disappeared. There was no burning, no battle, no collapse, just silence. A vanishing so eerie, it still unsettles archaeologists today. What caused it? One of the most convincing theories points to climate. Geological records reveal that the monsoons, lifeblood of the region, grew weak around 2000 BCE. Rivers that once roared, like the legendary Ghaggar Hakra, began to die. Many believe this was the Sarasvati of ancient Vedic lore, a river said to have disappeared under divine curse. But this wasn't just myth. In the late 20th century, satellite imagery shocked the scientific community. A massive, dried-up riverbed snaked across the Thar Desert, exactly where folklore said it would be. Even today, after heavy rains, parts of it still flood briefly, revealing hints of forgotten walls, buried dams, and ghost cities. Another theory speaks of an earthquake, so powerful it shifted tectonic plates and redirected the Ghaggar Hakra's flow west. Water vanished, and so did the civilization that depended on it. And then there's the migration theory. Some suggest Indo-Aryan newcomers disrupted the region. But the evidence doesn't align. No scorched buildings, no skeletons piled in corners, no trace of conquest. If outsiders arrived, they found a land already fated. But perhaps the most radical idea of all, the Indus cities didn't collapse, they transformed. There were no emperors, no unifying script, no capital. These were city-states, connected by trade and ideas, not by thrones. When the rivers dried, the network broke. But instead of crumbling, they splintered, adapting, moving, evolving. New crops like millet emerged, camels replaced boats, horse use increased. The pulse of civilization didn't stop, it just shifted. You can still feel it today. In Gujarat stands Adalaj Vav, a 16th century stepwell carved from stone, still echoing with ancient chants. The water glistens in the dark, mirroring the same reverence the Harappans once held. Water as life, water as ritual, water as memory. One archaeologist captured it best. When I stand at that well, I see Indus faces in the water. Same gestures, same reverence, just dressed differently. This wasn't the end. It was a migration of minds, beliefs, and sacred traditions, still flowing quietly beneath the surface. The taste of the Indus. We talk about their cities, but rarely do we ask the most human question of all. What did the Indus people eat? The soil at Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro holds the answer. From the dust, archaeologists have uncovered a rich spread of ancient ingredients: wheat, barley, lentils, peas, chickpeas, sesame, and mustard. Grains and legumes, simple, sustaining, and still present in nearly every South Asian kitchen today. The same flatbreads torn and shared in rural India and Pakistan could trace their lineage back over 4,000 years, when Harappan hands kneaded flour on stone querns and cooked rounds over open fires. But the surprises run deeper. Cotton seeds were also found, not just for weaving, but possibly for oil. Residues suggest the Indus people may have used cottonseed oil for cooking or lighting. Alongside it, sesame, still drizzled over sweets and stirred into sauces, was grown right here. These were not just crops, they were cornerstones of culinary identity. And the Indus weren't just farmers, they were herders too. Bones of zebu cattle, buffalo, goats, sheep, and the world's earliest domesticated chickens tell a vivid story. Pottery containing milk residues suggests they drank it and likely curdled it into yogurt or buttermilk, rituals that still unfold daily across Sindh and Gujarat. You can almost see it. A Harappan family, seated in the shade of a mud courtyard, passing a clay cup of cool, fermented milk from hand to hand. Then there was the river. Hooks, net weights, and piles of fish bones confirm that river and sea life were part of the menu. At coastal towns like Lothal, shellfish remains, oysters, and clams hint at grilled delicacies shared over fire-lit meals. Further inland, dried fish likely made its way to desert cities like Dholavira, traded as protein-packed sustenance where farming struggled. But here's where it gets spicier. Literally. Mustard seeds, turmeric dust, ginger fragments, even traces of black pepper in cooking pots. These finds suggest the Harappans were among the earliest spice users on Earth. Imagine a bubbling lentil stew, aromatic, golden, and flecked with ground mustard, served beside warm, grainy flatbread. It's not just a guess, it's the ancient ancestor of the meals still devoured across the subcontinent today. And yes, even alcohol may have made an appearance. Fermentation jars unearthed at Harappa contained barley and fruit residues, likely the remnants of a rudimentary beer or wine. These brews may have flowed during ceremonies or gatherings, poured into terracotta cups and passed around the fire in scenes that feel strangely familiar to this day. Food for the Indus people was never just survival. It was ritual. It was rhythm. Nearly every home had a courtyard kitchen and a private well, making food prep a daily act of family and identity. Meanwhile, the massive public granaries of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro reveal a civilization thinking far ahead.
Mohenjo-Daro is the largest and best preserved city of the Indus Civilization,
storing grain to feed entire cities during crisis. And just as today's meals carry spiritual weight, so did theirs. Figurines holding bowls may have represented offerings to the divine. Ritual pits filled with animal bones suggest ceremonial feasts. Food wasn't just nourishment, it was sacrifice, celebration, connection. The cities may be ruins now, their names eroded by time. But the flavors, the habits, the sacred hunger for taste and meaning, that part of the Indus has never disappeared. Lost cities beyond the river. The Indus Civilization was not just a cluster of cities. It was a constellation, its lights scattered across 1 million square kilometers.
From these little statuettes in the Indus Valley, which is in northern India. So there was this huge thriving civilization.
Each site, though different in scale, held a secret that expanded the story of one of humanity's greatest experiments in urban life. Take Lothal, in modern-day Gujarat. At first glance, its ruins look modest compared to Mohenjo-Daro. But beneath the dust, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary. What may be the world's first dockyard? A vast rectangular basin, lined with baked bricks, connected to a canal wide enough to berth several ships. And it stunned historians because it revealed the Harappans as seafarers. Long before the Phoenicians or Greeks set sail, the Indus people were already navigating the Arabian Sea. This dockyard was a portal to the wider world. From here, ships carried beads, ivory, cotton, and carnelian across the waves to Oman, Bahrain, and Mesopotamia. In return came copper, tin, and precious stones. Inside Lothal's warehouses, rows of seals and stamped goods were found, as though shipments were packed and ready to depart on voyages that never happened. The image is haunting, a bustling port city, silenced in an instant. Then there is Kalibangan in Rajasthan. Far from the Indus River itself, it preserved a different kind of legacy. Here, archaeologists discovered the world's earliest plowed fields. Perfect furrows etched in the earth around 2800 BCE revealed systematic farming of wheat and barley. Even more remarkable, the evidence showed double cropping, a technique that modern farmers still rely on. The Harappans were not just planters, they were innovators in agriculture. But Kalibangan wasn't only about food. Excavations revealed rows of fire altars, layered with ash and pottery. Unlike Mohenjo-Daro's Great Bath, these altars suggested rituals centered on fire.
The citadel is home to the city's exceptional monuments, including the Great Bath, a 900-square-foot tank fed from the Indus River.
Rituals that may have echoed into later Vedic traditions. Were these the first sparks of the fire sacrifices, or yagnas that would shape Indian spirituality for millennia? The evidence is incomplete, but the parallels are too striking to ignore. Further west, in Surkotada, another surprise emerged: horse bones. This find stirred a storm of debate. Horses were long thought to have entered India much later, with Indo-Aryan migrations around 1500 BCE. Yet here they were, in a Harappan site. Did the Indus people domesticate horses themselves, or acquire them through trade with Central Asian nomads? The answer is still elusive, but it forces historians to rethink migration and cultural exchange in the ancient world. Taken together, these satellite sites reveal a truth often overlooked. The Indus Valley was never isolated. It was a living, breathing network. Lothal shows us merchants on the seas. Kalibangan shows us farmers experimenting with crops and rituals of fire. Surkotada shows us a people brushing against the edges of myth and migration. And when the great rivers began to dry and the heartland dimmed, it may have been these outposts that carried fragments of the civilization forward. Traders, farmers, refugees, each carrying their knowledge into Gujarat, Rajasthan, and beyond. So, were they the true pioneers of urban life? Did their language vanish, or is it hiding in plain sight? Could the taste of your lunch trace back to their kitchens? Drop your thoughts below. We're listening. And if this ancient mystery gripped you like it did us, hit that subscribe button. More lost worlds, hidden clues, and untold secrets are just one click away. Don't miss what we uncover next.